Here's a recap of loner life in another world. If you're enjoying these summaries, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated. Our tale kicks off with a lone boy observing a bunch of goblins chatting by a campfire. Just as he adjusts his stance, a twig snaps beneath his foot, drawing the creature's attention. Without missing a beat, he dashes off, with the goblins giving chase. But there's a twist. A sly grin forms on his face. This was his strategy all along. The goblins, unaware, stumble right into a pit trap he had set in advance. The boy finally shows his face, sighing in relief, realizing that his plan worked by a hair's breadth. Grateful that he had set the trap ahead of time, he reflects on how he's managed to stay alive in this world by relying on no one but himself. The scene then flashes back to the moment it all began, when he was pulled into a different world. Meet Haruka, our protagonist, spending his lunch break during school just reading in silence, like always. He openly admits that he's a loner, and by his own choosing. He enjoys solitude and thinks that being around others would only disturb his peace. Haruka describes how the rest of his classmates naturally split into different groups. There are the fashion girls, the tough guys, the teacher's pets, the sporty types, and the geeks. Everyone else falls into the general miscellaneous crowd. Haruka emphasizes that he doesn't belong to any of them, and he prefers it that way. He tries to catch a quick nap, but suddenly the classroom starts glowing. Everyone around him panics, but Haruka quickly notices a magic circle forming beneath them. Strangely, he gets excited, thinking they're about to be transported to a fantasy world. That thrill vanishes quickly when he realizes this is probably going to be a massive headache. Trying to dodge the situation, he makes a break for the exit. But, of course, the door won't open. Refusing to give up, he throws everything he can find at the door in desperation, but nothing works. In one last effort, he climbs into the ceiling, confident that he's found a loophole in the summoning magic. He relaxes for a moment, thinking he's safe, but fate has other plans. Another summoning circle lights up directly above him, and in a blink, he's whisked away to that familiar empty void so common in otherworld stories. Haruka stands there, half expecting a royal figure or some all-powerful deity to greet him. Instead, he sees an awkward-looking old man sitting there alone. This elder god rushes toward Haruka in a panic. Muddling his words, he explains that Haruka's entire class was already sent to the new world, and somehow, he forgot one of them. Haruka cracks up laughing, teasing the god for missing him while he was hiding up in the ceiling. The old man, embarrassed and flustered, insists Haruka quickly pick a skill so he can send him off too. Haruka's handed a massive skill list, only to realize all the top-tier powers have already been snatched by his classmates. Frustrated, he starts combing through what's left. One odd skill called Dice stands out. It lets him boost a stat point if he rolls a pair of sixes. He scoffs at how ridiculous it sounds but keeps browsing the combat options. Of course, only the lamest skill, Can Only Master, is left, and Haruka finds it laughable. Finally, he checks the starter items and is greeted with the pitiful offerings, a villager set and a pair of contact lenses. With a weary sigh, Haruka scrolls through the available magic spells, only to be met with a lineup of utterly uninspiring options. Pushed to his limit, Haruka grabs the deity by the collar, shaking him in exasperation and yelling about how he'll be wiped out before even leaving the starter zone if this is what he's working with. He rants, demanding the god do his cosmic job properly and hand over something actually useful. Clearly just wanting the man gone, the flustered god throws up his hands and gives Haruka every leftover skill and flings him into the new world without further discussion. The scene cuts, and Haruka finds himself standing alone in a thick forest, facing a pathetic-looking villager equipment set. He lets out another exasperated sigh, rummaging through the supplied bag. To his surprise, it has infinite storage space. Inside, he finds some basic gear, a cheap wooden staff, a pair of contact lenses, and an assortment of random leftovers. Accepting the reality of things, he throws on the gear and tries to get into the fantasy mood before attempting to open his status screen. Instead of stats, a prompt appears asking him to activate his dice roll ability. Intrigued, he rolls the dice. Both land on the letter M. Stumped, he stares at them, wondering what M could possibly represent. The system asks him to assign the result to a stat. Realizing that brute stats won't cut it in this world, he bets everything on luck. When the status finally appears, he sees that his luck stat has been maxed out, so the M stood for maximum. A rare flicker of optimism surfaces. He checks his full status sheet and, as expected, most of his skills are bottom-tier throwaways. But two new ones catch his eye. One is Loner, which literally forbids him from forming any kind of party or team. The second is Command, a leadership ability that ironically won't help since no one will ever follow a guy destined to be solo forever. With a bitter groan, Haruka realizes that any dream of a fantasy harem is officially dead on arrival. Thinking of his classmates, he shrugs. None of them could join him anyway. Accepting his miserable hand, he shifts focus to surviving and establishing a base in this unfamiliar terrain. As he trudges through the overgrown woods, he grumbles about the poor visibility thanks to the thick foliage. Then he remembers the contact lenses from earlier. Popping them on, his surroundings immediately become clearer. Names and information begin popping up over every plant and item around him. It turns out the lenses grant him an appraisal skill. Suddenly the world seems far less intimidating. With growing excitement, he stumbles upon a cluster of edible mushrooms with a curious bonus: they boost hidden potential. Haruka eagerly shoves the supplies into his bag, trusting its enchantment that allows it to carry an infinite number of items. A sense of confidence washes over him. If he can find this much so easily, he's sure he can track down whatever else he needs. Not long after, he comes across a river, fills up his canteen, and drinks deeply to refresh himself. Soon, he stumbles upon a cave and pauses at the entrance, silently hoping it's not already home to something dangerous. After a brief hesitation, he steps inside. Thankfully, it's more spacious and cozy than he expected. It occurs to him that this might actually work as a shelter, especially since he's carrying camping gear like tents and lanterns. He gathers the dry leaves and twigs he collected earlier, then uses his magic to generate heat and spark a fire, hopefully enough to keep predators at bay. Before calling it a night, he opens his status screen. His temperature control spell has advanced, unlocking access to fire-based magic. A few other skills have also appeared: enhanced vision, the ability to detect presences, and the power to track hostile beings. It makes sense. He thinks he's been on high alert this whole time. As he starts drifting off, he wonders what he'll do if something shows up during the night. But eventually, sleep takes him. When he wakes the next morning, he's relieved that nothing disturbed him. Hunger soon hits, so he kindles a new fire with his recently acquired flame spell and prepares a quick meal of mushrooms and dried meat, lightly seasoned. He's pleasantly surprised by how edible it turns out. While going through his belongings, he realizes just how useful the so-called villager kit really is. The tools, cookware, everything is high quality. He starts to wonder if that villager was more than just a simple local, maybe a seasoned survivalist. After eating, he leans back and starts planning his next move. He decides to venture further into the woods, for now treating the cave as his home base. His next priority is setting up better defenses. On the way, he collects more herbs and mushrooms but quickly comes to a conclusion: monsters are going to be his biggest threat. Almost on cue, he senses movement and spots 2 goblins nearby. His heart races, but he reminds himself they're just weaklings, even if their stats are a bit above what he anticipated. Haruka debates his odds, but knows he has no choice if he wants to keep pushing forward. He wraps his cane with a layer of magical enhancement using his item wrapping skill, boosting its power, and it works surprisingly well. Feeling more capable, Haruka steels himself with determination. He'll prove he's more than just the kid with no cheats. He rushes forward, cane glowing with energy, and dispatches the first goblin with ease. The second lunges at him, but its attacks are clumsy and easy to read. Haruka avoids them and counters. A blast of magic finishes the job, and the fight ends. As evening approaches, he washes up by the river, proud of his first victory. It feels like a real turning point. Back in the cave, he eats another simple meal and eyes a wooden club dropped by one of the goblins. He tosses the weapon aside with a sigh, too short in reach, heavier than expected. Compared to his reliable cane, this thing's just dead weight. Curious, he checks his status screen and blinks in surprise. A level up already? Just from smacking a few goblins? Not that he's complaining. A new skill also catches his eye, magic infusion, and apparently his calisthenics proficiency has ticked up too. By the 3rd day, though, Haruka's already fed up with the endless diet of mushrooms. He finds himself daydreaming about meat, chuckling bitterly at the thought of how his class rep would scold him for whining. Still, with a grumble, he chokes down more fungi and turns his attention to that new skill. Magic infusion, when activated, coats his body in energy, giving him a noticeable boost in physical performance. It also toughens up his magical defenses and sharpens his bodily control, an unexpected bonus. Even his appraisal ability has leveled up to 2. Unfortunately, it now returns more question marks than information. Haruka frowns, wondering if this is some kind of cruel bug or just a late-game mechanic messing with him. With a shrug, he sets off into the woods, planning to train his magic. But his focus quickly breaks the moment he sees, yet again, another damn mushroom. Disappointed, he sighs and jokes to himself that if meat grew on trees, he'd have his fill by now. Snapping back to task, he reactivates magic infusion and bolts through the forest, surprised at how nimble he feels. His agility's clearly been enhanced. Soon enough, he crosses paths with another group of goblins, tougher than the ones before. Still, they go down faster than he expects, fueling his confidence. He starts thinking maybe he could handle 3 at once now. That's when he sees them, 3 hulking goblins up ahead, clearly on another level. His overconfidence vanishes in a heartbeat. Instinct kicks in, and he ducks behind the nearest bush, heart pounding. Silently retreating, he reminds himself he's nowhere near ready for that kind of smoke. For the next few days, he sticks to a steady rhythm, goblin hunting by daylight, studying spells by moonlight. On day 5, he finally lands a clean kill with a single strike. Feeling productive, he spends some effort fixing up his cave, installing a makeshift gate and crafting some basic furniture. That night, luck finally smiles on him. He catches a rabbit. Real food at last. He's fired up, ready to devour something that doesn't grow from dirt. Just as he's about to celebrate, though, he senses movement. It's the girls from his class. He groans internally, absolutely not in the mood for social entanglements. He ducks into the shadows, but then senses another group, the class delinquents. Even worse. Using his clairvoyance, he sweeps the area and realizes his entire class has arrived, including the rep's group. For a moment, he considers approaching her. They've known each other since childhood after all. But the moment fades. He's not about to play the friendly fool. Honestly, he's starting to enjoy the solitude. No commands, no chaos, no classmates dragging him down. Just him, his skills, and a world to master. With a steady breath, Haruka makes his decision. He'll rise on his own terms, no strings attached. Haruka ducks into a bush just in time as a group of delinquents pass by. One of them pauses, saying he heard something, and starts edging closer to where Haruka hides. He parts the leaves and peers in, but only sees a bunny nestled among the foliage. Shrugging, the group moves along. Relieved, Haruka exhales quietly. He wasn't spotted. Still, curiosity nags at him, and he decides to follow them from a safe distance, thinking he might uncover something important. To his disappointment, the group isn't plotting anything sinister, just engaging in a ridiculous, cringe-worthy conversation about the female classmate's body proportions. Haruka rolls his eyes, regretting wasting time on them. In a world without rules or authority, he worries these idiots might eventually cross a line, but he figures the class rep will keep them in check like she always does. Just as he's about to stop listening, Haruka catches something troubling. The delinquents are scheming to manipulate a fellow student, some unfortunate nerd named Tanaka, into using his abilities for their own gain. That's enough to confirm their trouble. But confronting them would mean talking to people, and Haruka would rather die than do that. He slips back to his hideout, a cozy cave, and resumes cooking mushrooms over a small fire. As he tries to clear his mind, he notices something unexpected on his status board. His loner skill just leveled up. It seems the game recognizes his social avoidance as an achievement. It probably happened because he dodged interaction all day. Honestly, he doesn't mind. He'd be happy to level up more, since he's still stuck at level 3. The problem is his two current skills, Master of None and Dummy skills. He hasn't figured either of them out yet. Master of None sounds self-explanatory. He's a jack of all trades, competent but not exceptional at anything. As for dummy skills, he guesses it might involve puppets or decoys, but he's not entirely sure. Deciding not to stress about it, Haruka digs into his meal, though he grumbles inwardly about the lack of meat. Soon after, he lies down to sleep, but loud noises from outside cut that plan short. With a sigh, he drags himself up to see what's happening. He expects the usual suspects, those delinquents again, but instead finds a group of nerds locked in a losing battle against goblins. They are clearly struggling. Haruka thinks about stepping in, but when he checks their stats, he's stunned. They're all level 16 with better skills than his. Surely they can handle this. Just as he's about to leave, he notices two goblins circling behind the nerds. If they're ambushed now, they are finished. Haruka hesitates, torn between walking away and stepping in. Then he recalls a time when those same nerds once let him use their rare holographic Charizard card. That small act of kindness seals the deal. Haruka bursts from the bushes, wielding a stick, and in one clean swing takes out both goblins. The nerds turn in shock to see him standing there. He asks if they're okay. They are, but they're clearly baffled to see him out here. After some awkward small talk, they express their gratitude. Haruka, true to form, struggles to keep the conversation going. It had been a long time since he'd actually spoken to anyone properly. Eventually, Haruka led the group back to his hideout. Despite being tucked away in a rocky cavern, the place was surprisingly inviting, cozy, warm, and thoughtfully arranged. He explained casually that he'd picked up some basic earth-based magic and crafting know-how to shape the interior. The others were amazed he'd done it all alone. As they sat down with drinks he offered, Haruka asked why they were wandering the forest at such a weird hour. That's when the tone shifted. Silence fell. The group exchanged nervous glances. Then, after a tense pause, one of them finally opened up. They were hiding from their own classmates. It all began the day their class was transported to this bizarre world. At first, everyone was just overwhelmed, but the shock faded quickly. Fear crept in. People started to realize this wasn't just some twisted dream. Some handled it better than others. The so-called popular girls weren't scared, more annoyed, like this magical mess was just a massive inconvenience. The tough guys tried to act like they were in charge, but their complete lack of real-world survival knowledge showed. Meanwhile, the outcasts, the ones often overlooked, were thriving. This was the kind of scenario they'd imagined 1,000 times before. The class rep, who usually kept things under control back home, did her best to rally everyone. She knew that panicking in an unfamiliar wilderness was a quick way to get wiped out. But before she could do much, it was already too late. A pack of goblins had picked up their scent. The rep, so composed in school, cracked under the pressure of real danger. And when she lost it, the rest followed. Even the would-be tough guys froze up, shaking and clueless. But the outcasts stepped in. Activating their skills, they fought back, strategically and without hesitation. Even the athletic types jumped in once they saw what was happening. They won. Barely. But danger still loomed. The rep gathered herself and managed to organize a retreat. They found a spot by a river and set up a rough camp. With the chaos behind them, for now, the ones with the most knowledge took charge. They shared what they knew, taught survival basics, and assigned tasks. For a short while, things looked stable. People had roles. It was working. Then things unraveled. The popular girls decided they were done. No more chores. No more effort. When the rep reminded them that everyone had to pull their weight, they brushed her off. And of course, if they weren't doing anything, the delinquents saw no reason to either. That left the rep and the outcasts to shoulder everything, setting up shelter, finding food, defending the camp. It was exhausting, but necessary. If they didn't keep the group alive, no one else would. Then came the real threat. In a strange white void where skills were revealed, two particular abilities made their stomachs turn, one that could control minds, and another that manipulated bodies like puppets. The worst part? They were sure one of the delinquents had grabbed the puppeteer power. The message was clear. If they didn't get stronger, and fast, they wouldn't just be fighting monsters. They'd be fighting their own classmates. At night, the troublemakers would head out to hunt beasts, not out of duty or bravery, but to gain experience and unlock dark abilities. One evening, while quietly listening in, the more studious students overheard something deeply disturbing. The delinquents were plotting to enslave the girls once their powers had grown strong enough. Alarmed, the studious group hurried to inform the class representative. Unfortunately, just a few days later, the delinquents had gained enough strength to begin using their abilities. As fate would have it, the class rep was nearby, and they marked her as their first target. Before they could act, however, the nerds intervened. They ambushed the delinquents and successfully subdued them, sealing away their abilities so they couldn't pose any more danger. With their powers stripped, the delinquents no longer posed a threat, and the girls, outraged by what had nearly happened, reacted with fury. The delinquents were promptly expelled from the camp. That should have ended the matter. But petty and vengeful as they were, the delinquents sought revenge. That very night, while the nerds were out, they returned in secret, not to seize power, but to sow destruction. They set the entire camp ablaze, reducing it to ashes. When the nerds returned, they were crushed by the loss. Everything they'd worked for was gone. To make matters worse, the popular girls somehow spun the story to place the blame on the nerds, accusing them of provoking the attack. Thankfully, the class rep stepped in, reminding everyone that the nerds had been the backbone of their survival. Though they were grateful for her defense, the nerds had had enough. Living among the ungrateful wasn't worth it anymore. They decided to leave and forge their own path. After listening to their story, Haruka genuinely sympathized with them. That evening, he hosted a mushroom-filled dinner for the group. Much to his surprise, he found their company enjoyable, something he rarely felt. Still, by the next morning, the nerds were ready to leave. Their plan was to follow the river and search for a village where they could begin anew as adventurers. Before departing, they invited Haruka to join them, recognizing him as a true friend. Though touched, Haruka declined, believing his worthless skills would only hinder their journey. Even so, a sense of unease lingered within him, mostly because the class rep, one of the few people he truly respected, remained back at the old camp. Wanting to know what had become of the others, he set out toward the camp to investigate. Along the way, a kobold attacked him. It bit at him wildly, like a crazed beast, but he managed to kill it and press on. As night fell, Haruka arrived at the riverside where the camp had once stood, only to find it abandoned. Curious, he used one of his tracking abilities to follow a trail of footprints, leading him straight to the popular girls. They were the last people Haruka ever wanted to see, and he immediately turned to leave. But it was too late. They'd already spotted him and started giving chase. Normally, he would have escaped without effort, but he froze in place when he heard something unexpected. They said, "Please." In all the time he's known them, the word please was never part of their vocabulary. So seeing them this desperate sets off alarms in Haruka's mind. Against his instincts, he decides to hear them out. The first thing out of their mouths? They want to know where the nerds went. Haruka pauses, half expecting them to be plotting another round of mockery. But what comes next catches him off guard. They actually want to apologize. For the first time, they recognize the value the nerds brought to their lives and genuinely regret how they treated them. The only problem is, the nerds are long gone now, and there's no way they could catch up. They don't even know how to survive in the forest, let alone fend off the creatures roaming it. Haruka asks how they plan to track anyone down when they can't make it through a single night out here, then follows up by questioning whether they even have the guts to do what needs to be done. The girls just crumble, admitting they wouldn't last on their own, and plead with Haruka to teach them how to survive. Caught completely off guard by their desperation, Haruka agrees without thinking. That's when his subjugation skill activates, and to his horror, the girls instantly become his followers. Their vacant, obedient stares lock onto him, and it chills him to the bone. When monsters attack, they leap to his defense, eagerly offering him the magic crystals afterward like loyal pets awaiting praise. Haruka hates how this is playing out. This isn't what he wanted. It feels off. When one of the girls scrapes her arm, Haruka gives her a healing potion, assuming she'll use it for herself. Instead, she uses it on him. He's growing more agitated by the minute. Everything they do now revolves around him, and it's driving him crazy. Worst of all, he has no idea how to reverse the subjugation, and if the class rep shows up, how is he supposed to explain this mess? As he's stressing over how to break the bond, the class rep suddenly appears. She tries talking to him, but he's too lost in thought to hear her. Only when she yells right next to him does he snap back to reality, realizing she's been standing there the whole time. Meanwhile, the delinquents are still plotting, ready to eliminate anyone who might interfere with their twisted goals, including the girls. Now Haruka's panicking. He has no clue how to explain this to the class rep. Worse yet, he doesn't even know her name. They've been classmates since elementary school, and she's always treated him kindly. She's stunned he never bothered to learn something so basic. Moments later, more girls from their class show up. Naturally, everyone except the popular ones is following the class rep's lead. Speaking of which, she notices the popular girls lurking behind Haruka, looking completely out of it, like their brains are running on dial-up. That's when it hits her, Haruka did something to them. He wishes he could deny it, but even if it wasn't intentional, his skills made them his servants. And now he's stuck trying to clean up the mess. Haruka tries to explain himself, but his words fall on deaf ears, with the girls not believing him. Frustrated, he decides to stop defending himself and begins to walk away. However, the class representative isn't going to let him off the hook that easily. She insists he stays while she checks on Shimazaki to make sure she's okay. Thankfully, a bit of shaking is all it takes to bring Shimazaki back to her senses, and she reassures the class rep that she's fine, putting her at ease. Haruka, thinking this is his opportunity to leave, turns to go, but the class rep won't let it go. She still wants to understand how the situation escalated in the first place, and she's not ready to let him leave without an explanation. While the girls continue talking, Haruka finds himself left alone by a tree. With nothing else to do, he decides to practice his magic. He considers expanding his house when he gets back, so he starts experimenting with creating a basement. However, being Haruka, he messes up and ends up buried in the ground up to his neck. Stuck in the dirt, he waits patiently until the class rep finds him. She's stunned by the sight, especially since she had only left him for a few minutes. But boredom can lead to poor decisions. She pulls him out of the dirt and apologizes for doubting him. Apparently, Shimazaki had told her that Haruka was only trying to help, which Haruka doesn't quite remember doing. Regardless, the class rep and the girls thank him, and Haruka just goes with it. Finally ready to leave, Haruka attempts to head home, but the girls get upset, claiming that he can't just leave them in the wilderness without offering any help. That's when the class rep catches on. Haruka had mentioned having a home, so she immediately asks him about it. Haruka casually explains that he had some free time and just built a house. The class rep is stunned. She can't believe he managed to construct an entire house by himself while they've been struggling with the camp. The other girls are equally impressed, and they quickly huddle together to discuss things. The class rep asks Haruka how many people his house can accommodate. Haruka, thinking it over, says it could fit about 200 people, though they'd need to rearrange some furniture and maybe drain the indoor pool. The class rep, envious of how effortlessly Haruka has done this, hesitantly asks if she and the other girls can stay the night since they're basically homeless at the moment. Haruka internally panics. Letting a few people crash at his place is one thing, but a whole class full of girls? The thought makes him feel extremely uneasy, but he manages to stay composed. Once he regains his calm, Haruka agrees to lead them back to his house. Thanks to his extensive wandering in the woods, Haruka knows the area better than the girls, and his skills even provide helpful tips to keep him on the right path. Eventually, they arrive at his house, and the girls are in awe. After all, it's been so long since they had a proper roof over their heads or the luxury of indoor plumbing. As soon as Haruka mentions that there's a bath nearby, the girls immediately rush toward it, stripping off their clothes in front of him. Haruka's brain goes haywire. There's no way he can survive a whole night under the same roof with them. Thinking quickly, he sets up a tent outside, hoping to get some peace and solitude to sleep. Just as he's about to relax, the class rep walks into his tent. She wants to talk to him. First, she thanks him for all his help, saying that without him, she wouldn't have had a clue what to do. After the nerds abandoned them, the gym bros also left, leaving the girls to handle things alone. It had been tough, but now that they had a bath and a decent meal, the mood had lifted. Still, the class rep confesses that she feels like a failure as their leader, admitting she couldn't solve the problem on her own. Haruka reassures her, saying she's being too hard on herself. Up until now, she's been the one keeping the girls together and looking out for them. The class rep acknowledges that, but if they'd run into any monsters, she wouldn't have been able to protect them, unlike the nerds who were more prepared for this situation. Haruka responds by saying it's unfair for her to compare herself to the nerds. They've spent their whole lives training for situations like this, so of course they'd be ready. Meanwhile, this is her first time experiencing anything like isekai. Given everything she's done, he tells her she's done an amazing job. The class rep starts to feel better, though she still compares herself to Haruka's accomplishments, particularly how he managed to build a fully functional house in just a week. She wishes him a good night and heads back inside. But with everything that's happened, Haruka knows there's no chance of sleep in the heat. Early the next morning, he's woken up by one of the girls sitting outside his tent, telling him to get up because breakfast is ready. Still groggy, it takes him a moment to process what's happening. But once it clicks, he starts to protest, wanting to sleep a little longer. The girl, however, isn't having it and climbs on top of him, trying to coax him out of bed. Haruka gives in reluctantly and asks what's for breakfast. Expecting the usual mushroom soup with even more mushrooms, he's pleasantly surprised to find fish on the menu today. Excited, he accidentally headbutts the girl in his enthusiasm. She winces, but Haruka's too happy to care because he finally gets a change from mushrooms. The class rep, confused by his excitement, asks why he's so worked up about eating fish when they've been living next to a river the entire time. Haruka admits that he's terrible at fishing, which is why he's never caught any himself. Curious about how the girls catch so many fish, Haruka asks for tips. The class rep agrees to show him and leads him to the river with one of the girls who has lightning magic. Her method is simple but effective. She electrocutes the water, stunning the fish, which then float to the surface. Haruka is amazed and begs her to do it again. Though hesitant, she agrees, since Haruka's been helpful. She conjures another lightning bolt, but before she can release it, Haruka quickly grabs it and seals it with his packing skill. He tosses it into the water himself and manages to catch several fish. Haruka's power now includes lightning magic, so he no longer needs the lightning girl's assistance. The class rep, puzzled, asks him what he just did. Haruka explains that by using his packing skill with specific elements, he can acquire that type of magic. It's probably a result of the diverse abilities he's gained, which is proving to be very useful. Despite this, Haruka still feels burdened by a collection of seemingly useless abilities. While the girls enjoy the river, Haruka sits down with the class rep, asking what their next step is. She admits that their plan is still unclear, but the goal is to find the nearest village and catch up with the other group. However, she mentions that they'll need to level up if they want to get out of the forest safely. Haruka, eager to help, offers to train them before they leave. Soon enough, the girls gather in the forest for Haruka's spontaneous training session. Before they begin, Haruka asks about their current levels. When the class rep reveals that they're all above level 15, Haruka feels a pang of disappointment. He's still stuck at level 7. He wonders if his help will even make a difference. To gauge their abilities, Haruka arranges a fight with a group of kobolds to see how the girls perform. The girls are confident, assuming the kobolds, who are only level 6, won't be a challenge. But moments later, they're all knocked out, lying on the ground. It turns out they didn't expect the kobolds to actually fight back. Bruised and embarrassed, they retreat to regroup. The strategy meeting takes place inside Haruka's magic tent. Thanks to its ability to expand, everyone fits inside, though Haruka still doesn't understand why they chose his tent for the meeting. After discussing their strategy, the girls are ready to go again, more determined than before. Haruka is glad to see their confidence, though he secretly doubts they'll win the second round. As they leave, the girl who woke him up earlier approaches, looking apologetic. She admits she was getting close to him on purpose to see if he would take advantage of the situation. Initially, she didn't trust him, but after he provided shelter, food, and training, she feels she can trust him now. She tells him she'll be back tomorrow with breakfast. Haruka, relieved, smiles and says he looks forward to it. Still unsure of her name, he decides to call her Fish Girl for now. The next morning, Haruka eagerly awaits another fish from Fish Girl but overhears the girls discussing their plans to return and fight the kobolds for revenge. Before they can rush off, the class rep stops them, reminding them that they'll lose again unless they train first. She suggests they start by fighting goblins instead. However, when the girls face off against the goblins, the outcome is an utter disaster. Despite their earlier struggles, a few of the girls remain determined to take on the kobolds again, while others mysteriously begin falling ill to avoid further fighting. Haruka isn't too optimistic about their chances and is prepared to step in if things go wrong. But to his surprise, the girls manage to learn from their previous encounter with the goblins and pull together to defeat the kobolds. The class representative congratulates them on their victory, and Haruka feels a sense of relief, believing that they can now handle themselves and he can return to his quiet, loner life. But just when he thinks he's free, the class rep thanks him for agreeing to accompany them to the nearest village. Haruka knows he never volunteered, but the class rep is insistent, and eventually, he agrees. Soon after, the group is packed and ready to leave the forest. Haruka warns them to stay alert, unsure of what dangers lie ahead. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, one of the boys from their class is seen running for his life, only to make the fatal mistake of looking back. He trips over a rock and is swiftly cornered by his attacker, strangled to death in an instant. Later, Haruka and the girls are walking through the forest, and he's already thinking about how to keep them safe from the troublemakers. But before he can get too far, they stumble upon an orc. The girls duck for cover, while Haruka steps forward, ready to face it. He confidently declares that he's going to teach the orc a lesson. As he charges at the orc, it swings at him, but to his surprise, it misses completely. Haruka, hidden behind a tree, laughs at the orc's failure. He recalls the nerds mentioning that orcs are tough against physical attacks but can be defeated with magic. Curious, Haruka checks his abilities and discovers he has access to grand magic, which includes fire, water, earth, and wind spells, all thanks to his packing skill except for fire magic. He thinks to himself that even the most basic skills have their uses. Just then, the orc finds him again. The orc swings, but Haruka dodges with ease. He then hits it on the head and tells it to calm down. Surprisingly, the orc falls dead. Haruka blinks in disbelief. Physical attacks were supposed to be ineffective against it. Meanwhile, the girls shoot him a glare, unimpressed because they didn't learn anything useful. Soon after, they encounter another orc. This time, Haruka uses his fire magic from his temperature skill, taking the orc down in one blow. He's shocked again, but the girls are now visibly frustrated, pointing out that they won't learn anything if he keeps defeating monsters in one hit. That night, while the girls sit down for dinner, Haruka sets up traps around their campsite to protect them from any monsters. Confident that the traps and his tent will keep the dangers at bay, he takes a look at the map from his appraisal skill. Noticing the river curves ahead, he begins to think about the best route to take from here. As Haruka's perception ability activates, he senses something nearby. Thinking it could be monsters, he moves closer, only to find it's not them, it's humans. Initially assuming they're the delinquents, he's relieved to discover it's the Jarks. From a distance, the class rep observes them talking. Haruka casually asks the Jarks why they're here, joking about whether they're after the girls as well. The Jarks deny it, stating they aren't after the girls but came to find him instead. With his usual sarcasm, Haruka teases if they've developed a new interest in boys, which clearly annoys the Jarks. They quickly assure him that's not the case. When Haruka inquires why they're hiding from the girls, the Jarks explain they don't trust anyone at the moment. They remind him about the skill they learned, one even more dangerous than puppeteer or charm. Haruka immediately recognizes they're talking about the hijack skill. The Jarks explain that while the delinquents made a fuss about puppeteer and charm skills, they never mentioned hijack, which means they don't possess it, but someone else might. Seeing a chance for mischief, Haruka pretends to have the hijack skill. Unfazed, the Jarks respond that they'd be fine even if he did have it. Then they ask if he really possesses it, to which Haruka admits he doesn't but reveals that he has the subjugate skill instead. The Jarks freak out, believing it's even worse, but they convince themselves it's probably fine since Haruka is a loner and will stay that way. Haruka, unbothered, remarks that being a loner isn't a problem. The Jarks then explain their sole reason for coming was to warn him about hijack, advising him to be cautious. They plan to monitor the delinquents and ask Haruka to apologize to the class rep and the girls for them. Haruka agrees, and they leave, unaware that the class rep overheard the entire conversation. The next day, Haruka tells the girls that they'll be heading back into the forest and urges them to gear up. The girls, eager and excited, nod, leaving Haruka wondering if they had some unusual breakfast because they're way too pumped. Stepping away from the group, the class rep pulls Haruka aside, asking to speak privately. Once alone, she tries to bring up the Jarks' warning. Haruka recalls they'd asked him to apologize, so he does, but that's not what the class rep wants to discuss. Looking nervous and unsure, the class rep hesitates. Haruka quickly pieces it together, she's the one with the hijack skill. Shocked, the class rep asks how he figured it out since it was meant to be a secret between her and the nerds. Haruka smirks, saying it only took one look to figure it out. He can't believe the Jarks missed it. Still confused, the class rep asks why he helped her if he knew. She wonders if he's not scared of her, considering what hijack can do. Haruka, unfazed, simply states there's no reason for him to be afraid. The class rep explains that hijack is a skill that steals someone's abilities by taking their life, something that would terrify anyone. Haruka shrugs, repeating that he's not scared. He's certain the nerds probably felt the same way. They had sealed away the puppeteer and charm skills, but hers was untouched, which gave Haruka all the information he needed. The class rep was confused by his words, but Haruka clarified that the nerds were secretly relieved that she had ended up with the hijack skill. I feel the same, he added, and upon hearing this, the class rep broke down in tears, both relieved and overjoyed. Haruka, as always the source of teasing, couldn't help but comment, saying she'd been crying too much lately. She quickly shot back, blaming him for making her cry so often. Laughing, Haruka pretended to flee in fear of being blamed for her tears. Later, after a long stretch of traveling, the group stopped for a break. Haruka returned with some juice for everyone, but naturally, he joked about charging them for it. The class rep, not amused, scolded him for trying to profit from his friends. Haruka just laughed it off as they continued their journey. Haruka noted they were ahead of schedule, but still, it seemed like they'd be camping out again tonight. As they moved forward, he noticed a river and saw it as the perfect chance to test something. He asked the class rep and the others to stay behind while he went ahead to scout. The class rep offered to join him, but Haruka told her to stay put and watch over things, then took off on his own. Once a bit further out, Haruka activated his magic wrap skill, cloaking himself in magic, and used his weight magic to make himself lighter. With his reduced weight, he started leaping from tree to tree, feeling like a ninja, marveling at how useful these skills were. But in his excitement, he jumped way too high and lost his balance, staring at the view before plummeting back to the ground. He crashed face first into the earth, barely surviving the fall thanks to the protection of his magic wrap. That evening, he limped back to camp, bruised and battered. The class rep immediately raised an eyebrow, asking how scouting could leave him looking like he'd just been in a fight. Haruka sheepishly admitted that he got a little carried away with his jumping and ended up face planting. The class rep, annoyed by his recklessness, scolded him. Trying to ease the tension, Haruka offered her some berries, but she wasn't having it and stormed off, leaving him standing there, feeling a bit guilty. The next day, thanks to Haruka's earlier scouting, they made excellent progress. Despite some exciting and even frightening encounters along the way, they handled everything with relative ease. After more travel, they finally emerged from the forest. The girls were thrilled to see open plains ahead, assuming the town was near. Haruka, however, grew more cautious, aware of how exposed they were in the open. He noticed that the hills ahead were blocking his line of sight. Checking his stats, Haruka discovered a new skill called Air Walk. Without hesitation, he activated it, walking literally on air. The class rep, shocked, yelled up at him, but Haruka was too focused on testing out his new skill to hear her. It wasn't until later that he noticed the class rep calling out to him, asking if he was okay up so high. He casually replied that everything was fine, mentioning he was just checking the area for safety. As he scanned the surroundings, he spotted some people being attacked by monsters. He relays the situation to the class representative, who immediately insists that they need to help. However, Haruka, ever skeptical, points out that the presence of monsters doesn't necessarily mean the people are innocent. He knows how easily the girls can trust others. The class rep suggests sending their fastest runner to assist, but Haruka argues it's futile, they won't make it in time. He proposes the possibility that they could be bandits, suggesting it might be safer to let things play out. Naturally, the class rep rejects this idea, firmly stating that if they're criminals, she will handle them herself. If they're innocent, she wants to offer help. Haruka rolls his eyes internally, knowing she'd react like this, but reluctantly agrees to go rescue them himself, leaving the girl surprised. Unable to run fast enough to reach the location in time, Haruka thinks of an alternative. Neither magic wrap nor weight magic will suffice this time, so he tries a different approach. By enhancing his physical strength with magic wrap and lightening his body with weight magic, he combines them with wind magic to propel himself into the air. However, the class rep gets caught in the gust of wind as well. As Haruka flies through the air, he activates his air walk skill, pushing himself forward. He's impressed by his newfound abilities, thinking that with these, he could go anywhere. But suddenly, he realizes the class rep is clinging to him. He asks her what she's doing there, and she explains that she was swept up in his wind magic. She tells him to stop, as they've already arrived. Haruka, unbothered, casually admits he hasn't figured out how to land yet. They crash into the monsters attacking the group, inadvertently defeating them in the process. Haruka picks himself up and checks if the people are okay. One of them, still in shock, responds that they should be the ones asking him that question. Despite the confusion, they thank him for saving them, though they're unsure how they survived the chaotic rescue. The leader introduces himself as Off-Tier, and his companion follows suit, introducing himself as Gigtech. Haruka is relieved that language isn't a barrier here. Curious, Haruka asks why they were attacked by monsters. Off-Tier explains that merchants in the area have been ambushed recently, prompting the Adventurers Guild to issue a quest to eliminate the monsters. They thought it would be an easy job for quick money but soon realized they were in over their heads. As they talk, Haruka spots a giant wolf nearby and learns that it's a creature called the Big Green Wolf. Off-Tier orders his team to gather the remnants of their belongings, clearly frustrated by the failed mission. With nothing else to do while waiting for the girls, Haruka decides to cook some mushrooms for the adventurers. As they eat, they realize they're being served stamina caps, a rare and valuable resource. The adventurers are shocked that Haruka is sharing such a rare item. Haruka, surprised they're considered rare, learns that stamina caps not only restore energy but also help heal wounds. Eventually, the class rep regains consciousness, and soon after, the rest of the girls arrive. They're in awe when they see a real elf, and the knight immediately surrounds the adventurers, treating them like celebrities. The adventurers, now recovered, lead everyone toward the town. After some time, Omu comes into view, and the girls, overjoyed, rush toward the town as the entire group enters together. The scene transitions to the delinquents, who have been diligently training to enhance their abilities. With newfound confidence, they believe they're finally ready to target the girls. However, Tanaka suggests they first go after the group of nerds, reasoning that they could force them to unlock the puppeteer and charm skills. The rest of the delinquents eagerly agree, oblivious to the fact that the Jarks have overheard their entire plan. Meanwhile, in Omu Town, the girls are practically skipping through the streets, giddy with excitement over all the wonders the city has to offer. They're fascinated by everything around them, but the class representative quickly reminds them that they're flat broke and still have a long list of things to do. She rushes off to corral the excited girls, while Haruka watches with a grin, feeling content that he's safely delivered everyone to the city. Now, he figures it's time to step back into his laid-back, carefree routine as a learner. However, the class rep is having a hard time keeping the girls in line, and in desperation, she asks Haruka for help. But Haruka has already kicked back, enjoying the shade, thinking his job is done. The class rep, frustrated, understands that he's relieved to be in the city, but the work is far from over. With a sigh, she blows her whistle, rallying the girls together, and lays out a plan. First, they'll head to the Adventurers Guild to sell the loot they've gathered during their journey. Then, they'll register with the guild and rent an inn for the night. Along the way, they'll ask around to see if anyone has spotted the nerds recently. It's a solid plan, but the popular girls immediately take offense, irritated that the class rep is treating the nerds as a side task. She quickly apologizes, but Haruka can't resist teasing the popular girls for caring so much about the nerds. Later, they arrive at the Adventurers Guild, which is far more intimidating than Haruka had anticipated. As soon as they step inside, they're met with hostile glares, and Haruka feels an uneasy sensation in his stomach. Before he can even contemplate leaving, Oftir informs him that the guild master wants to see him. Haruka, sensing this might not be a good sign, asks the class rep to handle the girl's registration while he heads upstairs to meet the guild master. Upstairs, the atmosphere is even more tense, and Haruka's nerves are on edge. At the far end of the room, Gatek is waiting to escort him to the guild master's office. Haruka enters, bracing himself for whatever might come next, only to find that the guild master simply wants to thank him for saving Oftir and his party. All that anxiety turned out to be unnecessary. Relieved, Haruka heads back downstairs, where he spots a counter and assumes it's where people sell magic stones. He approaches the attendant, who confirms his assumption. Haruka casually dumps a large pile of stones onto the counter. There are plenty more where that came from, but before he can pull out the rest, the attendant asks him to stop. She informs him that he's just unloaded 2 days' worth of overtime worth of stones onto her desk and kindly asks him to return tomorrow so she can finish appraising what he's already given her. Haruka isn't in a rush, so he agrees to wait, knowing the girls have already finished registering as adventurers. It's now his turn. Haruka walks into the registration room, confident and grinning, but that smile quickly fades when the guild worker delivers some bad news: he's too weak to become an adventurer. Apparently, to register, you need to be at least level 10. Even then, you'd have to join a party to qualify. If Haruka wants to register as a solo adventurer, he needs to be at least level 20. Unfortunately, he's only level 9, and thanks to his loner skill, forming a party is impossible. It looks like he's stuck with no job for the time being. Later that evening, the class representative leads everyone to the lodging the guild has arranged. When they arrive, Haruka starts to panic because the place looks suspiciously like a love hotel. However, he calms down once he realizes it isn't one. The group says goodnight and heads to their respective rooms. The following morning, they gather at a diner for breakfast. The class rep excitedly informs everyone that the town is known to be incredibly safe, so they're free to explore and do whatever they like. The girls eagerly start planning a shopping trip, and seeing that they can manage on their own, Haruka decides he'll head back into the woods after getting paid for his magic stones. After breakfast, he goes to the guild to check if his crystals have been appraised. When he arrives, the staff apologizes, explaining that they don't have enough funds on hand to pay him in full. The guild master steps forward to personally apologize, asking if Haruka would accept payment in installments. Haruka, ever laid back, says it's fine, and the guild master breathes a sigh of relief, grateful for Haruka's understanding. In the meantime, the guild master hands him what they've already appraised, 8 million air. Since Haruka and the class rep have learned that the currency is equivalent to Earth's, this windfall is massive. Haruka struck gold because he brought in more franc stones than the guild has ever seen, and on top of that, he killed some green wolves, which increased his payout. With a small fortune in hand, Haruka decides to do some shopping before heading back to the forest. That's when Gatek suggests a place Haruka might want to check out. Naturally, Haruka assumes Gatek is taking him to some kind of adult establishment, but to his surprise, they end up at a rundown weapon shop. The shop specializes in rare items from dungeons, and since Haruka is an unusual case, Gatek thought it'd be the perfect place for him to gear up. The shop may look like it could collapse at any moment, but Gatek assures him the quality is excellent. Trusting Gatek's judgment, Haruka decides to give it a try. The gear might look odd, but its effects are incredible. Haruka spends the entire day browsing and purchasing as much as he can afford. Just as he's about to leave, he notices a necklace that catches his eye. It's looking pretty decent, but when Haruka uses his appraisal skill, all he gets is the cryptic message fit 7. It's the same thing he got when appraising his villager set earlier. Curious, he asks the shopkeeper what fit 7 actually means. The shopkeeper explains that the necklace allows the wearer to combine up to 7 different item effects and use them simultaneously, which excites Haruka because it sounds incredibly useful. If this effect works with his villager set too, it means he can stack even more bonuses on his gear. Just as he's about to start experimenting with different combinations, class rep bursts in, scolding him for staying out so late. Haruka, realizing he's been there for hours, admits he still has a lot to try out. While holding one of the items, it suddenly reacts, and before Haruka can understand what's happening, all the items in front of him fuse into a single piece. The shopkeeper, understandably furious, reminds Haruka that he hasn't paid for any of this yet and that all those items cost him over 10 million EI. Haruka panics, realizing he doesn't have that kind of money. Thankfully, Gapk steps in, offering 8 million as a compromise to settle the bill. The next day, Haruka sulks over his empty pockets. He'd love to go out and gather more crystals, but the problem is, he can't leave town to hunt monsters unless he's a registered adventurer. He's already tried sneaking out with some of the girls, but class rep caught him and lectured him for it. Now, Haruka's come up with a perfect plan to escape unnoticed. His villager cloak got combined with an invisibility cloak, so he figures this is his chance to sneak out without anyone noticing. He slips past class rep and the others, feeling guilty for not saying goodbye, but knowing she'd definitely stop him if she found out. Haruka manages to escape the lodging successfully, but once outside, he makes the classic mistake of taking off his invisibility cloak, thinking he's clear. As he tries to jump over a wall, a few girls standing nearby spot him. In his panic, Haruka trips and lands awkwardly, slamming his family jewels against the wall. Groaning in pain, he yells at the girls for scaring him. They stare at him in confusion, asking why he was jumping the wall in the first place. Realizing they're from the athletic group, Haruka quickly notices one girl is missing. Using his perception skill, he spots her about to strip naked in the middle of the street. Panicked, Haruka and the athletic girls rush to stop her, managing to intervene just in time to keep her from fully undressing. However, Haruka's grand escape plan is a complete failure. The next day, all the girls prepare to head out for a guild quest. Haruka, still determined to tag along, asks if they'll let him join, but class rep immediately shuts him down, not trusting him after his failed attempt to ditch them. She assures him they'll be back soon, and Haruka nods, agreeing to wait. But the moment they leave, his grin returns. He's got no intention of just sitting around. Having learned from his previous mistake, Haruka keeps his cloak on until he's well beyond the city gates. Once he's safely clear, he removes it, officially leaving the city behind, with only a peaceful journey to his forest home ahead. But as he runs, he spots a cluster of ruined buildings off in the distance. Normally, this would scream side quest, but Haruka is too focused on getting home to care. He spots a group of goblins in the distance, perfect for quick experience points, but again, he decides against it. His goal is the forest, not leveling up. Just as he thinks he's in the clear, he stumbles upon a carriage under attack by bandits. It's hard to ignore, especially when he hears the cries for help from the people inside. Haruka hesitates for a moment but ultimately decides that this isn't his problem and tries to keep moving. Of course, as soon as he tries to leave, the bandits notice him and make him their next target. Annoyed, Haruka tries to reason with them, explaining that he doesn't want to get involved. The bandits, however, have no interest in reasoning and continue their assault. Left with no choice, Haruka pulls out a fire spell from his staff, a weird item combination he got stuck with, and burns them to a crisp. The staff turns out to be much more powerful than he expected. As the bandits struggle to get back up, Haruka, still wanting to avoid unnecessary conflict, warns them to leave him alone if they know what's good for them. The bandits, thinking his magic is his only strength, decide to close the distance and take him on in close combat. They make a huge mistake. Haruka knocks them all out with a single strike, leaving them dumbfounded and desperate for answers. They ask him what his job is, but the question hits a nerve. He's still unemployed, and it stings. The bandits decide to check his status to see what they're dealing with. When they see he's only level 9, their cockiness returns. They assume they can overpower him with their weapon skills. Haruka knows weapon skills unlock at level 20, so he doesn't have any, and he starts to feel nervous, knowing how dangerous those skills can be. The bandits unleash their weapon skills, but they foolishly shout out their attacks before striking. Haruka is unfazed, dodging every single one of their moves until they collapse from exhaustion. Just when he thinks it's finally over, he hears footsteps behind him. He groans internally because he's sure this is going to turn into one of those unskippable side quests. A girl approaches him and introduces herself as Moriel, a noble's daughter, thanking him for his help. She hesitates, remembering how he tried to ignore her earlier, unsure if she should be grateful. Nevertheless, she appreciates his eventual help and has a favor to ask. Her father is the lord of a nearby city, and she wants Haruka to accompany her back for her safety. Haruka isn't interested, but the mention of a reward catches his attention, and he reluctantly agrees to escort her. As they travel, Moriel strikes up small talk, asking where he was headed when they met. Haruka starts unloading his frustrations about the city he just left. He rants about how the guild didn't have enough funds to pay him, refused to register him as an adventurer, and even made it impossible to leave without a permit. As he vents, Moriel's eyes widen, realizing he's talking about Omayan, the very city her father governs. Overcome with emotion, Moriel begins to cry, heartbroken by Haruka's negative view of her home. Haruka, feeling a sudden pang of guilt, realizes Moriel is the daughter of the Lord of Omayan, meaning the carriage he's escorting is taking him right back to the place he'd been desperate to leave. He regrets ever agreeing to this side quest. Back in the forest, tensions are escalating between the gym bros and the delinquents. The gym bros refuse to let the delinquents hurt the girls, while the delinquent leader has no qualms about killing to get his way. As the leader raises his sword to strike, he's unexpectedly stabbed in the back. Both the gym bros and delinquents freeze, shocked by the sudden attack. As the remaining delinquents try to retaliate, the first one steps forward, only to meet the same fate with a swift stab. The last two delinquents attempt to team up, hoping to even the odds, but their attacker is just as quick, taking them down effortlessly. Realizing they're completely outmatched, the gym bros try to flee, but the assailant appears in front of them, moving with terrifying slowness and menace. Meanwhile, Haruka has reluctantly been dragged back to town by Moriel. He didn't want to come, but seeing her upset, he agreed to go along to keep the peace. When they arrive at the Lord's mansion, Moriel leaves him alone for a moment, and Haruka, unimpressed by the luxurious surroundings, heads straight for the door to leave. Before he can make his escape, Moriel returns, clearly upset that he's trying to bail on her after she specifically asked him to wait while she changed. She insists that he stay a bit longer, as she's planned something special to thank him. Haruka doesn't want to stay, but seeing her insistence, he reluctantly agrees. At first, Haruka was dead set on leaving, but when Moriel finally reveals the feast she's prepared for him, his attitude shifts entirely. The lavish spread is her way of showing appreciation, but soon enough, she's annoyed again because Haruka is completely ignoring her, too busy devouring the food. As he continues to gorge, Moriel instructs one of her maids to bring out the rest of Haruka's reward. A pouch of money is presented to him, and while Haruka nods in acknowledgement, he barely seems moved. As a bonus, Moriel also arranged for a custom ID card to be made for him, giving him unrestricted access to the city. It's a thoughtful gesture, but Haruka, now lost in his dessert, barely notices. The next day, the class rep and the other girls immediately start questioning Haruka about what happened the previous night. Haruka casually mentions that he was summoned to the local lord's mansion, and while the class rep can tell he's not lying, she's puzzled as to why the lord would want to see him in the first place. Haruka keeps the details vague, not wanting to reveal that his meeting with Moriel happened after a failed escape attempt. The girls finally drop the issue and get ready to leave for their mission. Just before they head out, the class rep reminds Haruka that he's not allowed to leave town. Surprisingly, Haruka agrees without resistance, though it's because he knows he'll be free to slip out once they're gone. Armed with a custom ID, Haruka can now leave the town without any problems. But before he heads off, he makes sure to handle a few things first, buying new gear, enjoying a hearty meal, and leaving a note for the class rep he hopes it'll prevent her from blowing up when she realizes he's gone. In the note, he tells her he's just checking on the Jarks back in the forest. It's mostly an excuse, but a small part of him is genuinely concerned about the Jarks. After showing his ID, he's cleared to leave, determined not to get distracted this time. Soon, he's back in the forest, relieved to find everything just as he left it. Feeling a little too relaxed, he lets his guard down for a split second, and that's when an orc attempts to ambush him. Luckily, Haruka's stats are high enough that the attack does nothing, and with one swift blow from his staff, he sends the orc packing. He's confused though, orc sightings in this area are rare. As he surveys the area, he spots a fresh blood trail, human blood. Given that the nerds are too powerful to fall to anything in the forest, he assumes it must be from one of the Jarks. He follows the trail and soon finds the Jarks, blooded and beaten, lying under a tree. At first, he thinks they're dead, but upon closer inspection, he sees them breathing. Without hesitation, he dumps every healing potion in his inventory onto them, and eventually, they regain consciousness. The Jarks explain what happened, and Haruka is shocked. He had assumed they were ambushed by the delinquents, but it turns out the delinquents are all dead. Haruka immediately asks if the nerds were attacked, but the Jarks don't know. They mention that the nerds had left the forest a long time ago. They notice Haruka's determination to find a culprit, so they warn him. Tanaka has grown ridiculously strong. The Jarks barely lasted against him, and to make matters worse, he took their overpowered weapons, making him even more dangerous. They suspect that Tanaka has been planning this from the moment their class arrived in this world, and they're not sure anyone can stop him. But one thing is clear, they believe Tanaka's next target is class rep. Haruka considers this for a moment. Tanaka might want class rep because of her hijack skill, but only class rep, the nerds, and he himself know about it. That leaves him wondering how Tanaka found out. The Jarks reveal that Tanaka had been relentlessly asking for class rep's whereabouts. When they couldn't provide an answer, he nearly killed them. Instead of handing her over, they made their way to Haruka, hoping he would reach them in time. Now, with Haruka's strength, they feel confident they can fight back together. But Haruka isn't so sure he wants to get involved in something like that. Haruka had come to this place to avoid unnecessary distractions, but when the class rep's safety is at risk, there's no way he can ignore it. He makes it clear to the Jarks that he's going to handle this by himself. They try to convince him to reconsider, pointing out how dangerous it is to face someone like Tanaka on his own. But when they see the cold determination in Haruka's eyes, they know better than to argue. Reluctantly, they agree to let him take on Tanaka alone. He sends them off to head into town and catch up with the girls, reminding them to apologize to the class rep for ditching her earlier. As the Jarks walk away, Haruka briefly wonders if having them fight with him would have made a difference. But deep down, he knows the risk is too great. If Tanaka overpowers them, no one will be left to protect the girls. So, he steels himself for the battle ahead, determined to face it alone and fully prepared. Back at the village, the class rep is beside herself with worry, realizing that Haruka has left the city. The other girls try to reassure her, promising that he'll come back soon. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Haruka runs through his plan to take down Tanaka. The Jarks had warned him about Tanaka's extraordinary weapon skills, which are nearly unstoppable. Even the nameless bandits had impressive moves, but Haruka discovered one critical thing: once a weapon skill animation begins, it can't be interrupted. If Tanaka attempts one, Haruka intends to exploit that brief moment of vulnerability. But to do that, he'll need a new skill, one that he can only unlock by leveling up. As if on cue, a horde of goblins, drawn in by the blood of the Jarks, appears. They're high-level enemies, so Haruka takes them down for experience. However, it's still not enough to level up, leaving him frustrated. He mutters to himself that he'll need something tougher to make real progress. Just as the words leave his mouth, a Goblin King materializes in front of him, and Haruka braces himself for battle. The Goblin King is fast and deadly, each blow a potential death sentence. Haruka dodges at the last possible second, unable to risk a counterattack without taking a hit himself. Forced to adapt, he uses his warp skill to combine several of his abilities into a powerful new technique. With this new skill, he surges forward and lands a devastating blow on the Goblin King, taking it down in an instant. Thrilled with his success, Haruka barely has time to celebrate when he senses a dark presence behind him. Instinctively, he prepares himself for another fight. This time, it's a Goblin Emperor, a level 50 monster, while Haruka is still stuck at level 9. He knows he has no chance in a direct confrontation. His only hope is to try his new combined skill again. He activates it, charging at the Goblin Emperor. The second he's within range, he strikes, but to his horror, his skills barely make a dent. The Goblin Emperor rises as if nothing happened, then retaliates with a series of incredibly fast and powerful weapon skill attacks. Haruka realizes that these strikes are far beyond anything he's faced before. He desperately searches for a break in the Emperor's attack patterns, waiting for his chance to counter. Finally, he spots an opening and lands a hit, sending the Goblin Emperor flying back. But just as Haruka thinks he's gained the upper hand, the creature begins healing itself at an alarming rate. Haruka knows that regular attacks won't be enough to defeat this foe. He needs a new combination skill, but before he can strategize, the Goblin Emperor strikes again with another devastating weapon skill, launching a barrage of lethal slashes. Haruka barely manages to deflect the blow, but the force leaves him battered and bruised. His odds of victory seem slim, yet he refuses to back down. He's determined to grow stronger, to protect those he cares about. Summoning his remaining strength, he rises and charges at the Goblin Emperor in a final, desperate attempt to end the battle. By the time the first light of dawn breaks, Haruka is the only one left standing. His relentless drive has earned him 2 levels. Now, with his new level 11, Haruka heads back home to check his status. As expected, his level up has granted him a few new skills, though he's uncertain if they'll be enough to beat Tanaka in a fight. At least with his newly crafted ability, he can strike in an instant, taking advantage of any weapon skill animation. Now, all he can do is hope that luck is on his side. Later that evening, Tanaka shows up outside Haruka's house, and Haruka was anticipating this confrontation. He remembers how Tanaka played the victim when the Jarks bullied him after their arrival, but now Haruka realizes it was all part of Tanaka's revenge plot. As they square off, the girls are returning to Onui after a long day of adventuring. On their way back, they spot a couple of guys slumped outside the walls. As they get closer, they recognize the Jarks, who appear to be in bad shape. Class Rep recalls that Haruka had left a note saying he was going to check on the Jarks, and asks them if they know where he is. The Jarks inform her that Haruka is fighting in the woods, defending them all. Back in the woods, Tanaka is frustrated to see that Haruka is the only one here. He had been hoping for the Class Rep instead, even going so far as to stir up the delinquents to divide the class. Haruka soon realizes that Tanaka has been manipulating everything from the start, and now he's prepared to kill anyone who stands in his way. Tanaka looks down on Haruka, dismissing him as a threat, and begins to walk away, determined to find the Class Rep and steal her hijack skill. But Haruka, despite his indifference toward his classmates, won't let Tanaka have his way. He raises his staff to Tanaka's neck, coldly declaring that he won't let him pass. Tanaka, irritated by Haruka's defiance, is more than willing to kill him if that's what it takes to achieve his goals. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for the next part.